Welcome back for part 2 of my space-themed road trip. Previously, I visited the exciting commercial space destinations in the Denver area, and then Spaceport America in New Mexico. Just to the east is the Whitesands Missile Range, where the first atomic bomb, the Trinity test, was performed in 1945. This makes for its own little tourist destination with the Whitesands National Park, the Trinity area, and a local museum dedicated to nuclear testing can be found. Also at Whitesands, Boeing and ULA lands its Starliner capsule here. So in the future, Whitesands will be welcoming home astronauts from the ISS. But take note of the location of this Army missile testing site, the prevailing direction of upper-level winds, and its proximity to the famous town of Roswell, New Mexico. Roswell's local culture and tourism are obsessed with an event just 2 years after the Trinity test, July 1947. A mysterious object crash-landed just outside of Roswell onto a ranch. Its curious shape, probably a disc or a capsule, and its shiny material suddenly placed this town among the most legendary pieces of Americana: UFOs and little green men. Adding fuel to the fire, when the military was inquired about what the object was, the initial response? It was aliens. However, a day later, this was retracted and the military instead called it a weather balloon. The conspiracy theories flew and the story sold. But let's take a step back. It's 1947, the very beginning of the Cold War. The Soviet Union is now developing an atom bomb, according to intelligence. The United States decided it needs a way to monitor any future testing activity. In the meantime, it can test this technology on itself. The US needs to know, how many nukes does the Soviet Union have? How big are these bombs? What fissile material are they using? All can be learned with photographs and radiation sensors. To do this, intelligence agencies needed a way to sneak surveillance equipment into the skies over the Soviet Union. Detectors aboard a craft that can sit at altitudes high above the Earth, evading detection and out of reach of any Soviet anti-aircraft capability. But in 1947, no one really had stealth technology yet, and no planes existed that could fly through the stratosphere and out of sight of an enemy superpower. The technology to send sensors to the stratosphere already existed. The Weather Bureau had been doing this for years, and this is probably how Project Mogul was born. Send sensors up with high-altitude weather balloons. Test how detectable they are to an enemy. Is it possible to detect powerful weapons testing with these methods? And figure out lesser-known details, like flight characteristics. Chances are, one of these balloons was launched from near the Whitesands Army Test Range, drifted in the prevailing winds over to Roswell, where the helium balloon popped and its sensor package landed in the hands of civilians. Being the top-secret project it was, the military absolutely had no choice but to lie to the public. Especially during the Cold War, our espionage apparatus preferred civilians thought cutting-edge technology they weren't familiar with was the work of extraterrestrials or of civilian science programs. And this pattern happened time and time and time again throughout the Cold War. But that's just what they want you to think. The simplest explanation is probably the most right. But don't let me spoil the fun here. Roswell is a riot for space nerds. Just about every business goes all in on this lore, and it's awesome. Roswell makes for a perfect destination along this space-themed road trip. South of Roswell, through Carlsbad Caverns and Guadalupe Mountains National Parks, is Corn Ranch, Texas, where Blue Origin's West Texas suborbital launch facilities are located. As I'm recording this, 14 tests of the New Shepard rocket have happened here. Additionally, Blue Origin uses this location to test its rocket engines, like the BE-4 engine, which will power the upper stage of the Vulcan rocket, as mentioned in Part 1, being developed by United Launch Alliance. But Blue Origin's launch site is awfully shy. There aren't many ways that I can see to get close to this location. Jeff Bezos, the mind and money behind Blue Origin, and the company itself are a bit less forthcoming and/or out in the open about their current projects, tests, and future plans or timeline, which is in stark contrast to some of their competitors, as you'll see near the end of this video. Blue Origin's New Shepard rocket will be in direct competition to Virgin Galactic's Spaceship Two spaceplane. Rather than a rocket-powered glider, New Shepard is at first glance a rather standard liquid-fueled rocket and capsule. New Shepard is special. Its engine has incredible throttling range. Its single engine can lift it off the pad, reach a speed and height that allows the capsule to reach the edge of space, over 100 kilometers above the surface. The capsule then separates from the booster, giving future space tourists a few minutes of weightlessness and a gentle spinning 360-degree view out of the capsule's enormous windows. The booster falls back to Earth in a controlled, dart-like configuration, partially controlled by special air brakes up at the top of the booster. Once near the ground, it fires its little engine back up, where it can hover above the surface, gimbal itself over to the landing site, and lands vertically. Ready for a refresh, refuel, and relaunch, perhaps in as little as just a few days later. The capsule, on the other hand, lands via parachutes. Just before touchdown, rocket motors puff for just a moment to provide a softer landing for the inhabitants. All of this can be seen from one of the nearby highways. However, you'll need some powerful binoculars or a telescope to watch with. Better yet, hop on a live stream of one of Blue Origin's tests for much better views. Unfortunately, you'll have to buy a ticket to ride to get a closer view of any New Shepard rocket or its facilities than this. Next up, the Big Bend of Texas. Down here, in this lonely remote corner of the United States, you won't find concrete statues of aliens or rockets or space museums. Instead, you'll get one of the best windows to space in the world, with both feet still firmly planted on terra firma. Plus, this place is pretty awesome anyway. Now, you could bring a camper or a tent and stay in one of Big Bend National Park's several campgrounds, but I've got a better plan. Nearby is Big Bend Ranch State Park, and camping here means no neighbors, no trees, no flashlights, or car headlights, or bathrooms for that matter. Oh, well, that was one heck of a drive. I made it though. Just in time. But I'm visiting the Big Bend of Texas at a very special time of year, during one of the most reliable and best meteor showers of the year, the Geminids. Every mid-December, the Geminids pay the Earth a visit. So called because the radiant or central point these meteors come from is near the constellation Gemini. Up to 120 Geminids, or perhaps more, can be seen each hour overnight near the peak, typically around December 12. There are pockets of the US, mostly out west, where skies are completely free of light pollution. But Big Bend, I'm convinced, is the best of these. Not only dark, there is practically zero aviation traffic either. This is in contrast to Utah and Arizona, where the skies are busy with flights to major cities in almost any direction. Combined with relatively warm and dry weather and often cloudless skies, this is why Big Bend, in my opinion, is America's best window to space. It's been said that almost 1/3 of Earth's current inhabitants have never seen the Milky Way, and it's even worse among US citizens. But that's only one really awesome thing you can see or photograph from an exceptionally dark sky like this. You want to know what my happy place is? Being under a dark sky, in front of a warm fire, with a beer in my hand. Cheers. All right, I'm going to show you something really neat that you can only see in the darkest skies, but especially well in a sky as dark as this. So what we have here over to my right is something called Zodiacal Light. You'll notice that Jupiter and Saturn are right in the middle of it, and it's oriented up this way. Over here is the winter Milky Way, right? So this is not the same thing. Winter Milky Way, Zodiacal Light. And what you're actually looking at is all of the dust, boulders, rocks, grit, sand, all the material that's fallen off of comets, broken off of asteroids, even spraying off of the surface of Mercury, in fact. It's all dust. So you kind of think of space as being this really empty thing, when in fact there's this sort of ring system or dust system that encircles the sun. The sun had just set down here a little over 2 hours ago. And it's right at this time that you can start seeing zodiacal light. And there are certain seasons where it's better and easier to see than others. I think winter is one of the best times to see them. But you can see them after dusk, after all light is gone, and you can see them before dawn, before light returns. It's oriented just like this because it actually follows the plane of the ecliptic, and it's called the Zodiacal Light because that's where all the zodiac constellations are. I believe that's Aquarius, if I'm not mistaken, and probably the backside of Sagittarius or something like that. And as you follow it along, you come over here, and you start hitting some of the other ones, like Taurus over here, for example. All of the zodiac constellations are where the planets happen to be, as well as the sun and the moon. You'll find them in those constellations. That's why they're called the zodiac. But this is called Zodiacal Light because it's in the zodiac constellations as well,
and it follows the plane of the ecliptic because that's where all the planets are. And sometimes Earth runs into this dust, right? And randomly. So that's when you see meteors every single night. You'll see probably a dozen an hour or more. But there are certain areas that are denser than others, and that's why we're seeing the Geminids, because that was laid down by an object called asteroid Phaeton. But yeah, it's always there, and you can only see it when it's really dark, and it's something that's sort of lost. You know, most people have not seen the Milky Way, and you know, that's only the start of it. The Milky Way is, you know, you can kind of get away with seeing that with a little bit of light pollution, but Zodiacal Light, you want almost none. Now, I'm going to pan the camera around because this goes all the way up, and it seems to nearly touch the zenith, the top part of the sky, all the way at the top. And it's kind of a wedge shape. It's wider towards the sun, narrower away. Yeah, over here is the Milky Way. This is the winter Milky Way, so it's not as bright as the summer one. It doesn't have that bright central core. But over here is the Zodiacal Light. You can see Jupiter and Saturn are in the middle of it. And the Zodiacal Light extends all the way up, almost to the top part of the sky.
Another thing was happening back in mid-December of 2020, the incoming conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. Not just our own galaxy is visible from these amazing skies with your own eyes. You can actually see two others. The brightest is Andromeda, appearing like a faint fuzzy football between the Great Square of Pegasus and Cassiopeia. Point a small telescope and a DSLR camera at it for about 15 minutes, and it looks like this.
Well, I think I managed to get a little bit of sleep. Sorry if it's noisy. It's almost noon. I had to sleep in and make up for the cold night that I had. But I was up until like 2 o'clock in the morning taking pictures. I filled all of my memory cards and killed all of my batteries. So everything's back in the truck getting charged up. I'm gonna make some coffee. This is considered an international dark sky site. I've already been here for one night. There are 0 light domes. Things like the Zodiacal Light are obnoxiously bright and actually wash out a whole section of the sky. This is quite an impressive location. So I've got that going for me. There's going to be no light pollution and no other issues. There's no moonlight. There are no nearby city lights or anything that are going to obstruct this view. And given that I'm practically in the desert southwest, there's very little moisture and I'm at higher elevation. So basically this is a best case scenario for this camera, for this combination. The telescope is a William Optics GT81. I believe it's an f5.9, but I'll paint the correct stats on the screen down below. So anyway, let's see what happens.
Some of the brightest Geminids might actually pop,
Oh, yes!
briefly illuminating the entire sky like distant lightning, sometimes even casting shadows. Occasionally, very bright meteors streak through the night sky. When this happens, it might leave an afterglow called meteor smoke. These are extremely fine bits of metal and dust left behind when the meteor burns up. And sometimes, although rare, those smoke trails can be seen in these dark skies with your own eyes. Think of Earth's atmosphere like a giant windshield. The pre-dawn sky is plowing forward into streams of debris left over by comets, or in this case, bits of dust and sand from an asteroid. And just like driving into snow, these flakes of dust appear to burn up in the atmosphere in a pattern that seems to come from a central point. This pattern is called a radiant. If you track the stars in the sky with your camera for most of the night during a meteor shower, you can later create a composite of your meteor captures, forming an image that looks much like this. Next stop, McGregor, Texas. SpaceX's McGregor test facility is where SpaceX tests its rocket engines and is also where the Grasshopper test flights were performed. SpaceX today routinely lands its Falcon 9 rocket, even making it look easy or even routine. Or well, sometimes routine. But it's not easy, and McGregor is where SpaceX learned how to do it. Between Grasshopper and Falcon 9 landing attempts off the coast of Florida, failure after failure was endured for years before finally making their first successful landing in Cape Canaveral on December 21st, 2015. 2 points I want to make here. First, recovery and rapid reusability are extremely important to the future of spaceflight, so enduring the mistakes and learning from them are key to SpaceX's success, which ever since has muted the critics and lowered the price tags for space projects of all sizes and needs. Okay, well, most of the critics. Public failure in the name of this progress, so long as no one gets harmed and all safety measures are carefully watched, are exciting, not scary or disheartening. I'll come back to this in a second. McGregor Leghorn Ranch is a bit shy as well, though not as much. You can even see Grasshopper right here, but I'm pretty far away. Not to worry, but I've got a long drive to make for my next stop. Before this next leg, I stopped at my buddy's Texas ranch under beautiful dark skies and took a few photographs overnight. It was a welcome opportunity for a shower and a warm, comfy place to sleep for once. Hundreds of miles south, just beyond the town of Brownsville, Texas, is the subtropical Boca Chica Beach State Park. An estuary is a very special place along the coast. They're typically in a place where a freshwater river meets seawater, or sometimes an intercoastal zone. This creates a very unique ecosystem. But this estuary is particularly unique. Why? This one launches Mars-bound starships. Boca Chica is home to the enormous Starship rocket production facilities and launch pad. And enormous just doesn't do this rocket justice. 9 meters wide, 50 meters tall. What's specifically being attempted here has never been attempted before, but does build upon the shoulders of giants. Rapid mass production of spacecraft, 100% reusability of an orbital class launch system, an unconventional landing procedure, and soon refueling in orbit. And all being done on a public road at a public beach, just inches from potential bystanders. But don't worry, the roads get cleared and everyone gets shooed away before testing happens. By now, most people have heard about Elon Musk's plan to send humans to Mars. But Mars is really only a pet project among dozens of use cases. I plan to do another video about all the things you can do with a Starship in the future. But to call a future successful Starship program game-changing would be the biggest understatement of the 21st century. As with learning to land the Falcon 9, this is a case where failure is totally an option. This is pathfinding, prototyping, and it's all very public. Each iteration of Starship proves out something new. Each new serial numbered Starship has already proven capable of doing things that until recently seemed like insanity. It's actually getting harder all of the time to immediately call any idea SpaceX has impossible. But now, it just needs to stick the landing. We've been here before. Every failure is a chance to learn. Serial number 8 and SN9 didn't survive the very last step of their test flights. And perhaps SN10, due to launch any day as I'm saying this, might not either. At some point, a Starship will land, and a few more are going to fail spectacularly. But through brute force engineering, design iteration, and just pure tenacity, the promise for a multi-planetary human race seems more like part of the next chapter in our lives, rather than a story told by some future generation. And I'm experiencing that firsthand, right now, with my own eyes. And so can you. I mentioned this is in a state park. You can literally drive on the beach in the presence of this history being made. I feel as though I'm reliving the 1950s on Cape Canaveral itself, next to equally retro futuristic rockets. You can even go camp overnight on the beach. So I did.
Let's go get this thing stuck, or try not to. Easy does it. Easy does it. Check that out. That's awesome. I don't know. I know there are places in the United States where you can do stuff like this. They exist. But they're getting fewer and fewer and far between. And I wonder when it stops being possible here. You wonder sometimes if they pave paradise and put up a orbital launch pad. I think that's how that goes. Anyway, this is cool as hell. The last time I camped out on a beach was on Lake Michigan. Never on an ocean side like this, so this is a totally new experience for me. Kind of look like a pirate here. I'm gonna try my twig stove out. There's no shortage of twigs out here. I have yet to find an environment where I couldn't use my twig stove somehow. So fuel is just always available I suppose if you were just out on the middle of a sand dune somewhere, you'd be in trouble, but or out in the middle of the ocean, unless you're in a wooden boat. How's that for a view, eh? I'll try to block the wind as best I can. It's just breezy. Moon, Jupiter, Saturn, SpaceX launch and construction facilities, Boca Chica Beach. That's just incredible. This is just cool. I don't know. You might think I'm nuts. I think this is cool. Just hanging out in the truck where I can get some light. Boca Chica Beach was supposed to be closed today and the following day for SpaceX work. And at the last second, that closure was canceled, which is why I'm even here at all. But the remarkable thing about that is I am the only person on this entire beach as far as I can tell. I saw the last person leave. I think everybody is still under the assumption, because when they got in here, they saw a sign that said it was closed, but it wasn't true anymore. It had been canceled. So I have all of Boca Chica Beach to myself, which is just kind of incredible too. I don't know, I'm just loving this. All right, well, that was pretty cool. Well, I'm about as far south as I can possibly be in the United States. I wasn't in Key West or Hawaii, that is, but it's time to pack up and get the heck out of here and head home. It's a beautiful place. Now, normal rocket companies will slowly design and carefully plan an entire launch system, qualify each component over and over and over again over the course of sometimes decades. They can get away with this in part because the technology has existed since the 1960s for most of the stuff that they're doing. They've just evolved it, iterated it, maybe computerized something. The changes are small, and many of the rocket motors and materials and things like that have been around for decades. They launch rockets with no intent to land them. They launch rockets with the intent of splashing their boosters down in the ocean, never seeing the second stage ever again, and with the payload in orbit, and wipe their hands of the issue, throw away the entire rocket and start over. But SpaceX wants to do something different. But this wasn't true in the 1950s. You'll see an awful lot of rocket disasters that come from the 1950s. New designs were being tested on the launch pad. There wasn't as much qualification. Everything was pathfinding. You throw it up on the launch pad and hope the rocket didn't collapse, didn't explode. If you were a rocket scientist in the 1950s, you got super excited if that rocket even cleared the tower at all.
I watched as the crescent moon, Jupiter, and Saturn sat just behind the Starship's production facilities. Activity at the site is around the clock. The goals seem to photobomb the means to those goals. And with that, my 9-day-long, epic, space-themed road trip comes to an end. Thank you all for watching. I hope you'll subscribe, check out my other outdoorsy science-themed content, like this video, or share it with someone. Until the next one, get out there and learn something new.